Well, friends, welcome back to Let's Get Weird About. This week, we are joined by Emma Skinner to tell us all about yet another Guillermo del Toro movie. This time it's Crimson Peak. So, join us, won't you?
Exactly. It's like, oh yeah, we're all the mini marketing departments for ourselves and all that stuff.
Yeah. So much of me like kind of taking further steps into doing different things in audio and acting has just been getting kind of blindsided with the 2x4 of wait, I also need to know how to market myself. I didn't realize that.
Exactly.
Oh well.
The thing I love is whenever I've talked to other creatives, it's the question of like, so how out of date is your website? Because everybody's supposed to have a website, and nobody's website is ever up to date. So it's always like, oh yeah, it's really old. I think mine's like 7 years out of date. No, it's got some of my projects from. It's actually got some podcast stuff on there, so it must be within the last 5 years or so. But still, like, come on.
It's not a question of if, it's a question of how much.
Exactly. Yeah. The question isn't, is your website out of date? It's how much is it out of date? Well, I guess at this point, the audience will probably have joined us. So the first question is always the same. It is, if someone is to ask the question, who is Emma Skinner? What do you hope the answer is?
I always hope the answer is on a profession, on like a what does Emma Skinner put out into the universe? I always hope for storyteller, does stories, writes stories, acts in stories. On a personal level, if you come up to me on the street, I hope a fun person to be around.
Oh, yeah.
So when putting those together, a storyteller that tells stories that maybe not always make you feel good, hopefully make you feel good. I like to create rooms that are not a net negative.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm underselling myself, but that's the bar.
I mean, it is the most sort of universe. I want to leave a positive impact on the world is very generic, but I mean, like that is because it is a good thing to try to do. But yeah, I hear you on the like, well, I'm not always trying to make people like happy. Sometimes I'm trying to be sad. So like, but sometimes sad is good. Sometimes you like, you need to like the catharsis of like the negative emotions and stuff.
I've worked on projects before that, you know, where I've written scripts that I've had people like reading in a room that are meant to be tragic, and then they finish and I go, yay, that was so great, that was so fun, and then I look around and everyone's sad and I go, oh, I hope you had fun though. I hope we all had fun still, even though it is sad.
Yeah, I've done those recordings too, where it's like, oh yeah, we did. This is real dark. We ended on a dark note. Well, if you don't mind me asking, what sort of kid were you?
I was a kid who read so much, simply so much. I got a book out of the library at one point in elementary school in lunch, and I think it was Life of Pi. And I was like 70 pages into it by the time that the class post-lunch started. And
very familiar.
My teacher was extremely confused by why I was reading under my desk.
Yeah.
I found all the books that were like for the other grades and read those very, very speedily. Yeah. Because I always wanted to know more. Yeah.
So it sounds like, so were you doing both fiction and nonfiction, or just mostly fiction, or? Mostly
fiction. I think I always gravitated towards that just because it took me a while, which I definitely do now as an adult. So much love to everyone that works on nonfiction. Yeah. But it took me a while to kind of, fiction had such a clear, there's a start, there's an end, there's an arc. And I would look at nonfiction and go, but this is just information about the world. And now I think that's the coolest thing ever. But as a kid, I was confused.
Sure. So you okay? I feel like this is almost a universal experience for like young bookworms, which is that you have those like half remembered books that you don't know enough to properly Google and like get a good result on, but it like you're like in the back of your mind, you're like, what the hell was that?
Yes.
You're like, was that a real book? Did I make it up? Am I conflating two books? And you like go looking for it, and you're like, oh no, I don't have like the relevant, like the one that lives in my head is this. I do not know. I read it in a single afternoon after some standardized testing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I, being a weird little ADHD kid, like finished my test in like 15 minutes and then just turned it in, and everybody else is still working. And then was supposed to be like a whole afternoon of testing or something. So I like, it was in the library and I grabbed a book, and it was like I'm going to say like Ender's Game. Well, this was way before I read Ender's Game. It was like a school for like a sci-fi school in space where they're like learning how to like pilot spaceships. And then like the main character is like trying to figure out the mystery for this one guy. And then it turns out that the mystery of this like student who she's trying to figure out what's going on is that he had like was a previous student that had then like flown out to back to his home and back. And the time dilation meant that he was physically way younger than he should have been. And that's why everybody didn't know what he was. That's all the information I have about this book. And it has been a mystery for, I guess, about 35 years now.
Because it's hard to figure out how to plug that into, into a search engine or a library bar. And
exactly. I don't know the title. I don't have any idea what the title might be. I don't remember any character names. I don't know. It's just like a vague idea of an outline. And like, this wasn't an important book for me because I read it once in a blur and then I never touched it again. But I'm like, I still can't find it. And just the lack of it is like, oh crap, there's like a hole. And I don't know why. Like, it's like, like I don't know what to do.
It's a little itch at the back of your mind where you just need to know the final solution to the mystery. But
oh yeah.
You don't know the title. I have a lot of core memories of, especially with TV shows, sort of the first flash or the first moment I got of them, because I know for a fact, and it's one of my earliest like childhood staple memories, that I walked in on, I think the episode is called The Idiot's Lantern, that I walked into the middle of a specific Doctor Who episode on TV when I must have been very, very young, because I think it was its original airing. And that night I was inquiring to my parents to explain who the man was with the blue box and to tell me more about this. And my parents were trying to figure out how to explain the 50-year history of Doctor Who to their child.
Yeah. Oh geez, that's one of those like, yeah, you can't, you just have to experience something like Doctor Who is so massive, Although at that point, like maybe it's just like, yeah, he's a guy, he's a magic man in a blue box. And that's probably actually all a kid really needs to know, right?
It breaks down very nicely, despite being so long and expansive.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those, the Doctor Who especially is one of those things that like, it's such a big continuity and there's so much there, some of which is like legit lost media that like they don't have the episodes anymore. Although some of those have since been found. That's a whole fascinating side story. But like, you kind of can't like you can't take it in bites. Like you can't do it methodically. You kind of have to just wade in and just like know that you're not going to know some stuff. If I feel like, at least with that one, the comic book, the big two comic books are also like that. The DC and Marvel, I think, which always bugs me. And that's not the kind of consumer of media that I am. I would much rather like start at the beginning and just do everything the proper way through and get a good grade in reading comic books. But yeah, sometimes with those big expansive ones, you're just like, I just got to go in here. I know I'm not going to know it. So you came to Doctor Who quite early then too. So that would have been like on PBS on the BBC on PBS here, or were you seeing it from some other source or?
I was seeing it while I was overseas.
Oh, okay.
But it was still pretty early. And then because my family loves it, I watched a lot growing up, and that's kind of I didn't really think until recent years of the scary side of Doctor Who, and then I rewatched some old episodes and went, wow, no, this is actually a very scary show when it wants to be. And I definitely that introduced me to feels strange to say that, but that introduced me to Fear. But I see
sure.
like the BBC, I see the old BBC kind of logo intro, and I have that moment of like, oh, I'm about to watch a Doctor Who episode. It will be spooky and scary, even though I'm normally not pulling up Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, you get that sort of deep-rooted association with Fear. It's funny how kids can miss the like scary stuff the first time around, and then you like look back at it later, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that was way darker than I thought it was. And like kids will just be like, whatever, that's just a thing. Like where you're like, you know, Patton Oswalt has a great routine about this, where he's talking about his daughter. He was showing her Schoolhouse Rock, and it was like a thing about like you know, talking about the skeleton and, you know, the names of the bones and stuff like that, and then he accidentally the thing ended and it switched to whatever the channel was, and it was like Guillermo, the other Del Toro guy, the actor, Benicio Del Toro's Wolfman movie, and he's like a wolfman, you know, it's all hulked out and stuff, and then like he's like, oh crap, she's gonna have nightmares now, god damn it. And like she did, yeah, sure enough, she had nightmares, but it was about the skeleton inside of her from the from the educational video. And it's like, there's a skeleton inside of me, oh my god. the horror movie, no, that's not a problem.
That just completely passed by.
Yeah, that's how kids work. So when did you come to Crimson Peaks?
So I came to Crimson Peak, I think maybe, I want to say 4-5 years ago.
Okay.
Back when I was back when I was making kind of this big shift in my life that I've started to look back on, because it was a couple years ago now, of kind of coming to horror media, which I had very staunchly defined myself for many years as I do not like horror. This is no longer true. I now love horror. I've completely reversed on that.
I love that. But I love people who've come around to it late. Me too. I'm with you on that one.
But this was definitely one of the landmark pieces that shifted me into that space of, oh, this is something I love. This is something that I want to do. This is something that I see all these possibilities in. And since then I've watched it. I rewatched it quite recently. Actually, I've rewatched it just so many more times than any other film. I don't tend to rewatch films, but I keep seeing it and I keep finding new things in it.
Oh, I love
every single time, which is great.
That's great. Yeah. I know. That's one of those films you really can like. I can see the justification for rewatching it over and again, because before I ever watched it, I had like read some of the production information about it, and like they had like really done their not research, but they'd done a lot of backstory work on like all of the ghosts and everything in it, and so like they really were putting layers into the movie. So the idea that like if you're gonna rewatch a movie, that's 100%. Like one of the ones you really ought to pick, because there's a lot to pick out of it. Unlike someone like me who like just rewatches Inside Man every year for reasons I can't explain, which is not a movie you should watch more than once. Okay, so in case our audience does not know, can you tell me like sort of the broadest possible strokes of the movie Crimson Peak?
Yeah, Crimson Peak is this big sort of sweeping gothic romance story in truly the most traditional, time honored avenue of the gothic romance story. I know that Del Toro was inspired a lot by Jane Eyre and Rebecca and things that are sort of the staples of that genre. It's a tale about a young wealthy woman in America, Edith, who falls in love with a baronet from England, and her father does not approve, and then her father mysteriously dies, and so she marries the baronet and is whisked away to this creaky old house in
creaky
the middle
is underselling
the house. This structurally deeply structurally terrible house far away in the countryside in England, which is the titular Crimson Peak. And of course there's ghosts and there's danger and there's hidden family secrets, and she must fight through all of this, and the house is very structurally unsound. I must reinforce that point.
Yeah. In like the best possible way. Like it's so the visual language that Del Toro uses, especially this might be where he's at his most striking, especially at least in that Gothic style, where like everything is like, I don't know, like the sets look like paintings in a lot of ways, and the color choice is so striking with the mostly muted colors, but then occasionally just this like brilliant reds. It's absolutely stunning.
Yes, yeah, he's talked in interviews before, which I think ties in nicely with that concept of rewatchability, about making Crimson Peak as a movie that doesn't have eye candy in it. It has, I think he calls it eye protein, which is such a cool way of phrasing that.
That is a
but of having
great
all
phrase.
of the
Yeah.
having all of the aesthetic details that are really tightly woven into the story and the characters and the backstory, so that you're picking those up subconsciously and then you're picking them up consciously if you're looking for them, which is a really lovely aspect of craft to see.
Yeah. The audience will know, and they're with me. They're here with me. This is like the third time this season that Guillermo del Toro's come up, so it's like turning into a stealth Guillermo del Toro season. But like he is all about just like lavishing everything he can with as much effort and thought and care and love that he possibly can. Like this is a guy who never half-asses anything. He like double asses absolutely everything he possibly can.
Yeah.
So did you see this in the theater, or did you come to it a little late?
No, I saw this in I think I may have seen this for the first time, not the optimal setting, but I definitely saw this, I think, probably just on my little laptop the first time, which does, in some ways does a disservice to the beautiful, all the visuals, but also it was great because I was sitting there in a pitch black room, just glued to the screen.
Yeah.
And I've been rewatching it on bigger and bigger screens ever since.
The cinema snob is always like, you got to watch it in like the Dolby XD, IMAX, blah, 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 blah. But like movies that can't survive being moved to a smaller screen obviously are a failure in their own right. Like, I don't know how many people have rewatched the original Avatar movie, but like it can't be that many. Like that movie doesn't survive being moved to a small screen. Like you're not going to watch Avatar, whatever that is, 2009 on your phone. Like it's, and so the fact that a movie that is so beautiful like Crimson Peak can survive being sort of having experience, I'm not going to say degraded, but maybe minimized or retracted, obviously says something towards its ability to communicate without having to rely entirely only on the visuals.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
if you came to this, a little bit later, did you have context going into this movie? Had you heard anything ahead of time, or?
I really hadn't.
Okay.
I knew that it was. I knew that Del Toro made it. I knew that it had several actors that I really liked, and I knew that it was horror, scary, spooky in some regard.
Yeah.
And so all of which is fully true.
Yeah.
But I don't think that didn't badly prepare me for it. But that kind of that was the surface level that I had of just very little information. And then when I actually saw the movie, it was kind of like I'd cracked that ice, and there was just so much additional detail beneath that and additional depth, especially in terms of genre, that I just was kind of blindsided by. So it was a lovely discovery. I love discovering something new that I adore. That I'm not expecting to adore. Sometimes you watch things and oh, this is really loved by a friend, or this is really well lauded in reviews, but it's also nice to watch something that you're just kind of sitting down to and then be bowled over by just how good it is.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm sorry to derail, because I have to say that moment of discovery of like a super, when you haven't gotten a bunch of context from other people, where it's like something you're just like, I'm just going to check it out, and maybe I've heard something about it, maybe I've only ever seen the poster. That moment is so so cool, like where you get to have a sort of personal relationship with the media, because it's not you don't have anybody else's opinion in your ear saying this is good, this is bad. If I don't like this, am I gonna have to have a discussion with somebody about like why I think it's bad but they think it's good? Like you get to have like that sort of one-on-one relationship with the story. And as I'm a huge proponent of people actually like seeking out spoilers and information about films and books and TV. I think that typically enhances the experience, but that doesn't mean I discount the fact of like that moment of discovery where you're like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into, and I'm going to experience it sort of cold for the first time. Have you ever heard of a movie called The Man from Earth?
I do not believe so. No.
Good. I would be I would be shocked. I have asked that question for 20 years at this point, and I've only ever had one person say yes ahead of time. So, this is a movie. This is my one exemption to the spoilers rule. I will normally tell people spoilers all they want. I will say you should go read the Wikipedia article before you watch something. The Man from Earth. I enjoyed that movie so much the very first time that I ever watched it, because I knew absolutely nothing about it. And so it's become my one, like, don't look on it. Like, don't even, you shouldn't even really know what genre it is. Like, it is, I want so badly for other people to experience what I experienced, which is that it was in the days of the early Netflix, when they just had like everything that and they could get a hold of. And it was just deep, and there was no algorithm to tell you what to do. You would just start looking for stuff. And I saw this, I just saw the poster, and I said, okay, I'll watch it. I was working nights, so I was in a giant empty office building with nobody there, and I didn't have anything to do because it was a support position, so I was waiting for people to call. So I was able to watch Netflix all day, and all night actually. And I watched this movie, and it fundamentally rewrote part of my brain. Like in the sitting down to watch it, I'm like, this is. And and again, it was that moment of like sitting there alone with a piece of media that like you didn't know anything about it. Just like, oh my God, like how did I live until the moment when I saw this,
It's great. It's really, it's very visceral to be able to feel that, because you feel that both in your brain and then also in your body, that just, oh, I have been changed. There's something in the world that I now know about, and this is going to impact what I do and what I make and just who I am.
Yeah. And so you said that this was your introduction to horror as a genre, like the thing that made it click for you to start enjoying other pieces of horror fiction. Is that right?
Yes. This in tandem around the same time, I think, with The Haunting of Hill House, which I experienced, I think possibly even in like the same month. That's which is a great pairing to have as at the top of your horror. Two great places to start. But this, there's so many things that I love about this, and Crimson Peak, I think, just drove home for me that not just that horror was really good, which I think I got from Haunting of Hill House. That was my takeaway from that media was, oh, this is a genre that's great, that I love. Crimson Peak was a moment where I went, oh, I want to make this. I want to make something this elaborate and beautiful, but also simple at its core, because the kind of the themes that play at the center of Crimson Peak are not, dramatically complicated. They are very near and dear to the heart and very understandable. And I, as a person that loves to create stories, just went, oh, this is a thing I can do, and that horror does so well.
Yeah.
And I want to be like that.
That's interesting. You're not the first person I've heard say specifically that about a Del Toro work, of like something about the way that he crafts stories is very encouraging to other people to say, I want to do that. Like something about not just like, interestingly, maybe it's the accessibility of his stories, that they're sort of simple at their heart. Like you're talking about with Crimson Peak, that like, oh yeah, no, this is something that like he presents things in a way that makes people excited to make their own things. It's fascinating.
I have, he's on my list of, and I have not watched all of his filmography yet, but I have an active project going to sit down and just watch all of it, because I love it that much. And I'm always, one of my big takeaways from all of the movies of his that I've seen is also just that love of genre specifically. Yeah. Because I always feel like we as you mentioned, he puts so much love and effort into his works. And they're also so different from each other.
Yeah.
When I watched Pacific Rim with my family the first time, they went, "Oh, this was made by Del Toro? We didn't
Yeah.
know that." And I was going, "Yes, it is, because it's a love letter to that genre, and Crimson Peak is a love letter to its genre." And
Yeah.
that's so lovely to see so openly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at his filmography here, and with the exception of Blade 2, which I'm not gonna sing the praises of Blade 2. Admittedly, it's been a very long time since I saw Blade 2, so I could be mixing it up with Blade Trinity. But like, this dude's got like it's like oops, all bangers. Like I haven't seen his very early stuff, but Devil's Backbone is amazing. Hellboy's great. Pan's Labyrinth is like another one of those sort of like life-changing movies in a lot of ways. Pacific Rim is one we've already talked about this season, and it's just like, come on, it's Pacific Rim. It's like it's so much in all the directions. I've heard really, really good things about his Pinocchio too. It's like on my short list of ones that I need to watch.
I saw his Pinocchio, and also just immediately finished. I was sitting on the couch going, "That's one of the best movies I've ever seen. Beautiful, wonderful. My life feels changed again."
The fact that,
and there were tears streaming down my face.
Yeah, the fact that nobody had made or as far as I know, there was no like mainstream stop motion Pinocchio movie. It's like one of those things. Like the moment I heard it, I'm like, oh my god, like that is the perfect medium for that story, and it's the perfect story for that medium. Like, how had this not been a thing? And I've heard some details about it. I'm really excited. Anybody else who is listening to this episode, go check out the Jacob Geller video about Pinocchio, where he watched like a bunch of different Pinocchio movies and goes slightly crazy about it. And he really, it's a very good video, but also he talks lovingly about the Pinocchio from Del Toro. Yeah. He's one of those guys, one of those directors, auteurs. Like, I mean, he's not even really an auteur. He just has such a distinctive style that it's you can kind of tell, you can smell a Del Toro movie even when it's not one. You know, like Pacific Rim, if you'd lined it up against the rest of his filmography, it does seem like a real outlier. But like when you get into it, you're like, nah, this is the same guy. Like he's got that just like unabashed love, and the
core is the same.
Yeah. And a real like just a deep, again, I can't use another word but love for genre. Like he respects genre stories in a way that a lot of other authors, a lot of other storytellers really don't. And he's able to see the virtues of genre stories. And they do have virtues. I mean, like they get really derided by sort of the mainstream stuff until they become mainstream. And then everybody else suddenly realizes, oh no, these things are cool too. There were, before Star Wars, sci-fi was not a respected genre even at all. And
then Star Wars, and now
Star Wars came around.
Star Wars.
Yeah. And from, that people had been doing stuff like that and taking it sort of seriously for 200 years since Mary Shelley. But like, that was the point when it kind of broke through, and then it becomes a widely respected genre. Nobody liked superhero movies until they became the thing that gets shoved down everybody's throat because it's incredibly profitable. Okay, maybe that's not such a good example, but yeah. So the Crimson Peak made you want to explore the horror genre. What was it about that you went like specific? Like, I'm trying to think about like what is it that made you go, oh, I want to write or I want to tell stories within a genre like this? Is there something that spoke to you about like kind of picking out these other types of story?
I think it was, so many wonderful things. I think it was kind of this appreciation for how heightened emotion can really, really punch through and still be treated as very, very valid.
Yeah.
I grew up with a lot of Shakespeare, which is, emotions at a 10, always life and death stakes.
Play to the cheap seats. Yeah.
Genuine, like the world is ending. There's a war, there's a murder, there's a romance. Everything is very, very important. And I knew that I loved that, but I hadn't really kind of understood how that related to my own creative work and creative practice yet. And in Crimson Peak, there are so many heightened emotions, world-ending stakes, love and horror, and the two being very, very intertwined,
Yeah.
and injury. I had a discussion with a friend after rewatching it recently about how the number of injuries sustained in the film by various characters is quite impressive, that everyone manages to keep going till the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's not ever subverted or
Mhm.
made to feel, or not that's not made to feel less than.
Yeah.
That's not kind of talked down on. And I
Yeah.
think there's kind of an unlearning that I find a lot of people I know, and myself included, have had to do, of no, you can't allow work to be sort of big and emotional and honest and not apologize for that.
Yeah.
I think there's sometimes a drive which comes from probably a lot of places, whether it be media or teachers or all of the above, to be super clever and subtle and kind
Yeah.
of box up all the levels of emotion. But you don't have time to do that in a horror movie because you are running from a ghost. You will be as scared as you
Yeah.
would be, and you will, if you are in love, you will be as in love as you will be, because there are ghosts and you could die.
Yeah.
And it's unlocks that.
Yeah. It really, by removing the necessity to be believable, I guess, because the genre fictions in a lot of ways require an additional suspense of disbelief than something like a straightforward drama might, where it's just two people in a regular house. But if you involve the supernatural, if you involve extraordinary things like ridiculous serial killers, or you take sci-fi elements or something like that, by saying to the audience, hey, look, we know this isn't real. Like, this isn't real. We know this isn't real. It is sort of liberated from that desire to be like grounded, and in that being removed from those shackles is allowed to sort of just like go for it and do all of the things that people kind of wish that they could do, or wish that they could see. And that includes feeling the big feelings. It's like being as scared as possible, being as in love as possible is a thing that like is another kind of experience that people are looking for stories about. And this is a excellent way to explore them.
Exactly. There's one moment it's in the first 5 minutes of the film,
Mm-hmm.
and I love it so much because it's in the first 5 minutes of the film, which is when you see the whole thing, the perfect place to put it. The main character, Edith, is a storyteller and an
Mm-hmm.
author. And at the very beginning of the film, in just the setup immediately, she's sitting in an office with somebody who's reading her work,
Mm-hmm.
and explaining, she's asked, oh, there's a ghost in it, and she explains, well, the ghost is just a metaphor.
Yeah.
Which is such a great thing to say in the first 5 minutes of your movie that has ghosts. It's immediately playing that hand and letting the audience know,
I love that.
the ghost is a metaphor. You can walk with me here.
Yeah.
That's okay. We can acknowledge that, and we can go as far down that road as we're going to go, and it's going to be great. And
Yeah.
I love, that's one of the defining lines of the film for me.
Yeah,
I love that it just leads with that.
That is such a good line. Yeah, that is so telegraphing to the audience what you're doing. Like, and in that way, sort of trusting the audience. Like it's a way of like sort of making it a relationship a little bit, and like an interaction between the authorial voice and the audience, the storyteller, and the person who's having the story told to them. And oh God, there's a whole philosophical discussion about like when you have a story told to you, you become part of the storytelling process because you have to imagine the story in your head. And so like you become an additional layer of the writing process. There's a whole thing there. So there's like no such thing as like a true authorial voice in the way that like it's always a collaboration between two people.
You are also the instrument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so the way to just sort of call out, hey, look, like, we're doing a thing here, and like I'm going to tell you what we're doing, and then we're going to do it, and you're going to be along for the ride. And if you're willing to, step down that path with me, then like we're going to have a good time. I love that. Yeah. That's such a cult shot. I love it.
And it's such a in media communication, trust has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I love the the attitude as someone creating to just start very openly with, okay, I'm going to immediately extend my trust to you, the person receiving this, knowing that, you know, if you're making a movie at the scale that Del Toro does, somebody's going to hate it. Somebody's going to write a terrible review of it. All of that is probably a given at some point. And just having the joy of setting that to the side, that doesn't matter. And openly going, I will start by giving you the trust because I will tell you what this is about. I know you will know. And anyone who wants to come here can come here.
Yeah. Del Toro definitely is one of those directors and storytellers who has sort of, you can kind of tell that he's not trying to placate everybody. He really is making stuff that he is going to like and that he loves, but like he knows that he's at this point got enough information to know that like there are people out there who are also going to love it, and he's like sort of playing to his own audience. And in that way, the people who like Del Toro movies really like Del Toro movie. Like it's like he is able to find a really strong connection because he's not watering himself down and his ideas down. So okay, so you would not come to horror before. This was your first, like, not this and Haunting of Hill House were sort of your introduction to it. Did you have a next up across, like, what was that path like? I'm just curious about what was your sort of those first introduction beyond Crimson Peak.
Sort of the next thing I moved to post Crimson Peak, as it were. Ooh, I definitely went from this sort of into the works of Mike Flanagan, who did TV Haunting of Hill House, but then also Haunting of Bly Manor, and later Midnight Mass. And those became a very integral part of me watching sort of horror on the screen. Yeah. And then when it came to horror in books, I'd already read this, but I have a deep love. Mary Shelley's already come up once. I have a deep love and a long enduring relationship with Frankenstein. Yeah. Because I read it 3 times before I had graduated high school for 3 different classes, and then I just kept working on it. Yeah. I've worked on an audio adaptation of it, which was very, very fun.
Oh, that's really cool.
And
yeah, if you're gonna get your teeth into something, Frankenstein is you would have a hard time finding something that would be like you can chew on more than Frankenstein. Like that is like I also studied it in high school, and I remember it being presented to me in the framework as of like, this is the first science fiction novel. There's lots of arguments about what could be the first science fiction novel, but in that context, to like fucking like knock it out of the park the way that Mary Shelley did with Frankenstein is like on the first attempt. Like it's like in a way that's like
first attempt, and you change the future of the genre forever.
Yeah, like not just define it, but like are you like it's really hard to like think of something that is a better both sort of exemplifier of both science fiction and horror, and like that's that gothic horror, and but also is like deep and existential and like willing to think about the big picture of the universe and ask big questions and not really necessarily have answers for them, but also sometimes have answers for them. And also like Mary Shelley's goth game was fucking off the hook. Oh my God.
Yeah. Genuinely. On the list of people that if I could talk with people in history long past, I would just love to chat with Mary Shelley. I would love that. I want to know so much. I want to chat.
Yeah. Like daughter of like one of the inventors of programming before computers existed, married to Percy Shelley, amazing poet in his own right. Also hung around with Lord Byron, who's just like one of the weirdest fucking people in the world. So much so that like the word Byronic still exists because people are like, oh, he's like he's the type example of a whole genre of guy.
He lived such a life that we are still using him as an adjective so many years later.
And then like we have, Mary Shelley, who like writes like one of the best novels of all time at like 19, I think it was, like young, really young.
Really, really young.
Yeah. Like I have to find out now, because how old was Mary? Oh, yeah, she started writing at 18 years old and finished it 2 years later. No, that makes me retroactively, as somebody who is like literally a week from turning 40, that makes me super fucking mad.
She just sat down, and it's like watching some, not immediately comparable, but it's the same. It's watching somebody sit down and take the hardest video game you know of and just 100% it on the first run through, and then go, I've never heard of this before.
It's such the energy of that one quote from Legally Blonde. What, like it's hard? Like,
yeah. Yeah. And the answer is it is in many circumstances, but I'm glad that it just happened for you.
I guess not for you. Yeah.
I definitely went back post Crimson Peak and kind of read Frankenstein with the new realization. When I read it in high school, I definitely read it similarly to you under the auspices of science fiction. Yeah. And then I went back and read it with Crimson Peak and went, oh, this is also a gothic horror. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of horror here that I didn't absorb. And then I went on a gothic horror roller, Jekyll and Hyde, through Dorian Gray, through all of, because I want Del Toro's love for that genre and gothic horror and romance made me immediately go, I need to know everything about the foundational classics of this so that I can also do it. Yeah. So I read all of those texts to try and better absorb what it was like.
Oh yeah. We were just talking about Frankenstein, and we've been talking about Del Toro. He apparently is making a Dr. Frankenstein movie, is according to Wikipedia at least. So hopefully that's not just in development hell this whole time. Filming began on January 25th of this year. Oh no, like it literally just started filming. Oh, okay. Yeah, after the SAG. Yeah, okay.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Hell yes, I am signed up for that. I will
be in the theaters so many times.
Yeah,
for that.
Yeah, there's so many films or stories that I'm like, man, I'd love to see his perspective on that. And that one's going to be freaking amazing.
You were mentioning that, you know, why it's wild that nobody's done a stop motion Pinocchio before, which is completely true because that's such a perfect medium. And I feel like some part of the universe 10 years beforehand, and then for however many long years it was in production, just had that concept in a box for Del Toro specifically of no, only one person can do this and we will wait for him. He will do it so perfectly.
Yeah. That's great. We've barely talked about the actual structure of the movie itself. We must be talking about it sort of like in a broader context. We already talked a little bit about its like visual design, which is absolutely stunning. And I have to admit, it's been a minute since I've watched it. I remember Jessica Chastain being like, well, like she's kind of always one of those actors that whenever she's on screen, I'm like enraptured. She is her screen presence is out of this world. But it's also I believe it's a Tom Hiddleston role. Is that right? Let me look. I can look it up here. I've got it. Yeah.
Yes, Tom Hiddleston as well.
Charlie Hunnam's in this?
He is.
Okay, that's just funny.
He is, and nobody ever, every time I have watched this film with somebody, they've gone, oh, who played Alan? Yeah. And I have explained, and they said, oh, that was him? I did not recognize him.
Yeah. More power to him.
So it's not just you.
Yeah. It's one of those guys. Yeah. It's like, wait. Oh, and of course, Doug Jones is in this. Yeah, like, who else are you going to get to be the, like, skinny person in makeup? It's like this whole thing. I'm trying to think of it. If there's, like I said, I'm sorry. It's been a minute since I watched this. I watched this not that long ago, but like only the once. So my memory is slightly scant on this one. I remember during my watch, the thing I really took away from it was the sort of cohesive storytelling around each ghost that she encounters. That like I came away from it with an impression of like knowing something about each of the people involved with that, which is really impressive for as little time as each of those have on screen.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It says something clear about the sort of like ability to tell a story in as few beats as possible. Like if you trace out a couple of pieces of information, you can get you can sort of get the arc. And that even though you're not showing every little bit of, like we didn't have flashbacks to each of these characters explaining who they are and what they do, but like we get an idea of them, and that fleshes them out as both real people, but also like a part of the world, and it makes that world sort of hang together and be more consistent in a way that's really impressive.
Yes. And it has kind of I love the ghosts so much in this, and the little pieces that we get of them has kind of that same feeling as this does the set in general,
Yeah.
of walking into a house that somebody is actually living in and has lived in for a while. Though ideally, if you walk into someone's house, I hope there's not a ghost immediately there. I cross my fingers for that. But where there's not a ton of immediate secrecy, people in the middle of their homes, their very private spaces, don't paper over all their history like they're immediately trying to hide it from someone, I think. And in this movie, the Sharp siblings also don't paper over the entire history of themselves and their house. They're concealing parts of it, but it's all there.
Yeah.
And the last step is just to observe it and put those pieces together. So watching it as a viewer, every time that you see the ghosts appear, I like that you get the duality of both being very scared because, oh, they're scary, this is scary, what's happening, but also you pick up a piece of, oh, this is how someone was killed, or oh, this is my second time seeing the ghost, and I'm putting this together with that name that our main character saw, and I think I might have connected those, and something else has clicked into place.
Yeah.
So you get to make those last two steps of mystery solving, of pulling the history out.
Yeah, and really that the house itself in Crimson Peak is like a whole character unto itself. Like just because it's it's a setting, but like there's so much information and visual design built into it, and it's so distinctive that it feels like a huge part of the of the movie itself. Like it you couldn't remove it from its location and have it be the same story anymore. And it makes sense that sort of pairing that with The Haunting of Hill House, what little I know of it, makes it seem like an excellent sort of the peanut butter my chocolate kind of situation. Do you play video games?
I do play video games. Yes.
Are you? Do you have on your radar a game called Anatomy?
I do not believe I have that on my radar. It sounds, title alone, like something I want to have on my radar now.
So the author of this game is Kitty Horror Show is the username they go by. I think it's she. I could be wrong, but I think it's she. And Anatomy is her game it's a horror game about houses, about like the house as an entity and a character, and like the way a house could be haunted, but like in a way that I struggle to explain. Luckily, it is only about maybe 3 hours long at the most. It's a relatively short game, and it's like, I think it's just on itch.io. It is, if you like The Haunting of Hill House, if you like Crimson Peak, and if you're interested in horror video games, then Anatomy is right up your alley.
I love that.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah.
I love everything that horror has, as I mentioned, that heightened emotion and also that bleeding of emotions into other things, into the supernatural and into place. And there's it. I think it's come up in every time I've sat down to work on anything horror related. In The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is Mike Flanagan's adaptation of Turn of the Screw. Semi-adaptation of a lot of different short stories, but especially that, there's this metaphor that's used at one point of a gravity well, of which in that case is being used to refer to both a person and a place, of just absorbing all of like a sponge absorbing all of this history and these feelings, and then that color leaching through everything. And I just love seeing that in all of the Gothic, in all of horror, this idea of effect and the things that we do in a place affecting that place, and then that place affecting us right back. Yeah,
man, the metaphor of like history itself and like stories having a gravity that then pulls people in that's great. I love that. That's fantastic. Well, is there anything you want to cover before we head out? Is there anything that we didn't get to just naturally that you want to bring up?
Ooh, the fact that they built the entire house for Crimson Peak just for real on a soundstage is a fact that I love, and I almost wish I didn't know because I want to go live there.
Yeah.
I wish I could just go be there in person.
Yeah.
For real, that would be great. Also, the soundtrack.
Okay.
This is a slight detour, but I have the soundtrack on repeat quite a lot. I was definitely listening to it earlier today because it's, again, so tied in with the genre. It's just full. It's either full like lush orchestral or Alfred Hitchcock style slasher strings.
Awesome.
Which is great.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. The sound of horror is so integral to making that genre work. Like, I don't know what age I was when I just, because my own personal relationship with horror is that I adore horror. I hate jump scares. Like, I do not like the sensation of being jump scared. And I react to it enough that like that was enough for me to just turn off the entire genre entirely, despite the fact that I really liked like the ideas that they're grappling with and the other parts of the motion. I just didn't like this one thing. And then at some point along the way, I was watching I watched a bunch of like special effects TV shows and stuff where they were talking about like sort of behind the filmmaking, and they were talking about how they got the noise that precedes the jump scare, the sort of like noise. I think it was like using a violin bow on a piece of metal or something like that. And when I clocked the noise, I went, oh, that's one of the things that's like a trigger, like a physiological trigger that gets you to have that reaction. And I realized, oh, once you start to sense that a jump scare is coming off, if you mute the TV, it doesn't affect. It doesn't matter anymore. Like almost all of the motion drains out of that when you remove the sound element of it, which was useful for me.
When you see the way that it's engineered.
Was that? Sorry.
When you see the way that it's sort of engineered.
Mm-hmm. But also, just removing the sound element takes a lot of the emotional punch out of it, and useful for somebody if you're trying to avoid being jump scared, but also really brings up how important the sound element is to making the horror work as a genre. That the ability to create atmosphere and tension and mood through the use of sound effects and music, like it doesn't work without it. You know, there are genres out there that would work without it, but I think that horror just kind of doesn't.
It needs to be there for everything to land properly. Kind of the inverse, almost the inverse separation of that is. So I play violin, fun fact about me. And there's a piece that I played a long time ago that still makes me laugh to think about. That's called, I don't recall the exact title, but it's called, I think, March of the Rosin Zombies or something. Okay. Rosin being what you use on a violin bow. And it's a piece that's just for an orchestra to have fun of everybody making a bunch of different horror movie style sounds with their instruments. It goes to pretty like the string kind of screech, which you do past the bridge, but honestly, everything that you could think of, like sliding and sharp staccato hits. And that was always really fun to me for realizing the same thing of I was hearing all of the sounds, but pulled into this completely devoid context because there's no movie. You're sitting in the middle of a bunch of people just doing silly things with their instruments that still kind of make your hackles raise autonomically because you have that response ingrained. So hearing the sounds just divorced from the movie also doesn't have the same effect. You need them both together. I'm gonna have to go Google this after we're done here because I really want to hear that. But also I have a fascination. I want to see what the sheet music must look like because they're doing so many non-standard things that like. That's got to be like you've got to have notations at like little notes probably like I need you to do this because like it's not a normal thing for you to do with your instrument. Oh, that's great. There's a lot more words than you normally have in sheet music. I think that's I don't remember exactly how it looked, but there's a lot more like you normally have a word or two of description for tone, and this has paragraphs about how to hit your instrument properly.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure it's like to go to like the Foley guys from the various Universal Studios places and be like, hey, how do we write down this? How do you guys get that sound? That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I mean, we didn't spend too much time on Crimson Peaks. We kind of ranged all over, but that's normal for this podcast. So thank you so much. If the audience wants to find you or your work on the internet, where can they look for you?
At the moment, I'm not very findable on the internet, tragically.
Okay.
I am working on that, but the most immediate place to find my work is I've done some voice acting for Breathing Space, which is wonderful, and we love it. And there's a couple other shows that I've worked on in the audio sphere, Twigs and Hearts, The Way We Haunt Now, and True Crime Frankenstein, which are all very fun listens.
Awesome. Well, I will. If you will send me the links, I will put them in the for maybe your episodes. For some of those, I can put them in the show notes, and people can find you there. Or if not, they'll just have to Google the names of the podcast and listen to the whole thing, because that works too.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will catch the audience at some point in the future, because this doesn't have a schedule. So, bye.
Bye.
Thanks again to Emma for leading me down the red clay path that is Crimson Peak. If you want to support our show, go onto your nearest rooftop and shout to the heavens how cool we are. Or, rate and review, like, subscribe, all that nonsense. If you want to support us monetarily, head on over to patreon.com/cursedknowledge. If you want to find more of our shows from our network, library.horse is a real website that I purchased and made. Other than that, join us next time when we're going to be talking about something with someone. I don't know. I didn't look it up before I started recording this just now. Give me a sec. Oh yeah. EverQuest with Jordan W. Anderson. That'll be fun. Till next time.